My name is Bobbie Moore, and I have in the past been called the Dirt Lady. But I love to compost. I'll just tell you that several years ago, in the 80s, with a chorus I belonged to, we went to Germany. And one of the fun things was a family adopted each singer in the group and did something special with them on Saturday. And my family took us, my husband and I, home to their house, and they had a compost pile in the back. And that's what I really remember about that trip. I mean, a lot of singing, but also just putting my hands in that German compost. It was wonderful. I loved it. So anyway, okay, so what is compost? That's also a good question, and I'll tell you how I learned to say either compost, which is finished, wonderful, rich stuff, or compostables, because if you ever compost for very long at all, it will kill you to be somewhere. Like if you're on vacation and you're in a cabin and you can't compost. I mean, it's like, I can't throw this away. Do I lug it home? No, I don't think so. So, so when I was in Colorado, I sent out a note to a garden club. I figured they're going to want compost and compostables. So I sent out the note and said, is anybody interested in compost? I'm here visiting, from Louisville country. Oh, and everybody. I got 29,000, well, I exaggerate a little, maybe 15 emails back saying, oh, I'll take it. And I'm like, oh, they think I'm giving compost away. Of course they want it. I mean, who would give compost away to strangers? Anyway, I learned if I want somebody to take my stuff, to call it compostables. Things that can get composted. So why would we compost? Well, compost, first of all, is organic material that's been in one form, and it breaks down into wonderful, beautiful dirt. And I'll show you examples of both of those kind of things. But so that's what it is. And why do we use compost? Well, it makes your dirt absolutely wonderful. Ha-ha, we have 2 more customers coming in the door. All right. It's George and Amy for anybody that knows them that's on Zoom. Welcome. Come on in. If you can find a seat, grab it.
You just get one up through the table if you want to.
Just come on in. What? So you missed what is compost and why, but
what do you call this
mess? So if you've lived in Kentucky for very long, you know what the natural ground is like. And so I brought a sample just in case your yard is just full of soft, wonderful stuff. You might want to see this. Well, this is clay. Okay. You might want to do a little pottery with it. I don't know, but it's really hard to garden with. But a lot of people are real negative about clay, but there's good stuff about clay. One thing is it holds nutrients. If you have real loose soil, like I come from the Chicago area, and the ground can be, some places it's wonderful, but a lot of places it's just kind of sandy. It's blackish, but it's real sandy. And when you put water in it, or if you're fertilizing with water, it just goes right through. Whereas clay really holds it. And it also holds the moisture. So, there's good things, but it needs to have some stuff done to it. And that's why we use compost. If you mix compost into clay, you have great stuff because then it holds those nutrients and it also holds the moisture. So when it gets real dry, underneath you still have some dampness, and that's what plants need. So plants need kind of just what we need, which is water, air, shelter. The shelter is out there, and food, of course. So this is the food it needs some water in order to work. In order for a pile to work, there has to be moisture and air. So you can do compost piles in a number of different ways. I had somebody this morning, there was another group in here before I started, and I was setting up. And this guy came up to me and said, I've been composting for years, but I never use it. And I never do anything with it. I
Oh
just
my God.
put things on the pot, just put things, well, guess what? That's fine. It keeps the food waste, which, this group might be interested in. That's what I think I heard a little. It keeps it out of the landfill. So, and once you're composting, it's real hard to throw that stuff in the garbage. You just think, oh, this, I could put this in my pile or do whatever. So here's the way I do it. It's kind of a lazy thing. So I have a bowl on my counter or an old coffee canister with a top on it. That, especially as it gets warmer, because otherwise you have fruit flies. So you need to keep it covered. So that's the first stage. And if I was super energetic, or maybe when I was 35 or 40, which was a little while ago, I would run out to the field and put it on my pile, put some other stuff on top, all that. But since I'm not, I do it. So I have the thing on my counter, and then I have a bucket outside my door. So it goes from my counter to the bucket. And maybe a second bucket. So eventually those buckets get carried out to the pile. And the thing is, if you always take it out right away, every few days or so, it doesn't smell. It's what you had for dinner last night. It'll be, celery. This was celery that turned out so good. Shavings from carrots. I have more coffee grounds than anything because I love my coffee. I drink coffee every morning. And I'm not a real cooker. I tend not to cook a lot, but I have friends that feed me sometimes. So that's real nice.
Convenient.
But here it is, here's the end of the celery. Here's cucumber. So it's getting wet. This was just in the bowl from Friday. This was from Friday. I kept it in because I wanted to burn it. So I wanted to have stuff. I didn't know if I'd be cooking or doing anything in between. Like I put the filters in, coffee filters. You had tea bags. You could put the whole bags in too. Coffee grounds. Some people take their coffee grounds and put it around, like acid-loving plants, azaleas, for instance. You might just keep all of your coffee grounds and put them around. Oh, and so one of the things I like about my compost pile is memories. So you can look at what's in your pile and think, ooh, that was a good fudgicle. Or, as they say in the South, fudge-sickle. And that might be the correct way, but I corroborated with another Northerner yesterday, and she says fudgicle. So I don't feel like I'm just pronouncing it wrong. Or at least there's two of us pronouncing it wrong. But so one of the things, what can go in the pile? One of the ways to think about it is if it comes out of the ground, it can go in your pile. That's an easy, if it's growing, it can go. Now, the thing that doesn't apply to that is eggshells. You can put eggshells in, and I do. I don't eat many eggs, but, if you eat healthy and cook, you'll have plenty of stuff for your compost pile. So here's another, there's another.
To the coffee filters and tea bags thing,
Yeah.
since they didn't come out of the ground.
Oh,
What about the fudge?
Originally, the coffee filter, what is it made of?
Paper.
Stuff that came out,
Sure.
right?
Okay.
Okay, and tea
Fair enough.
bags? Okay.
What about the fudgicle?
What?
The fudgicle didn't come out of the ground.
The fudgicle, no, but the wood that was holding them, I didn't put the fudgicle in there, I just.
Hey, on the fudge.
It's a sort of form of ice cream, which I love. So, okay, one thing that will happen is you might get some volunteers. And this was a volunteer. We're not sure what it was. It could be a combination of some seeds, but it's kind of interesting. Oh, and one thing I found out, I wanted to eat it. I wanted to try to cook it and taste it, but my neighbor said she read that the things that you get volunteer, which I couldn't believe at the time, but I thought, all right, I'll take her word for it, are poisonous. Well, what I found out, yeah, I mean, there've been for years and thousands of years things that come up and they're not poisons. People eat them. And we eat the tomatoes that come, you know, if you get a tomato plant that comes up in your compost pile, it's wonderful. You feel like it's a gift. You didn't do anything and there it is. But anyway, so I didn't do anything with it. But I read afterwards that that can be true if it's bitter. So had I tasted it and found that it was bitter, I wouldn't have eaten it. But if it wasn't bitter, I would have had a whole good meal. But this is what was inside. You know, this is just laying on top of the pile all winter. So, you know, you can imagine like, I don't know, butternut squash or some kind of a big squash, and that's what it looks like. But now it's ready for compost pile. So I'm just gonna put it
So
there.
that grew out of your, so when you say volunteer, you mean things that grew up
Yes,
out of
ma'am.
compost?
There was a whole,
Oh,
or a
wow.
bunch of them.
Wow.
And
I've never had anything come up.
We had,
well, you're probably a better or a neater
Oh,
composter
maybe.
than I
I
am.
don't know.
Some things just kind of end up, you know.
Uh-huh.
So I don't know what it came from, but I thought it was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And, you know, this will wake up and it's hard, but eventually, pardon me?
oh, I was just gonna mention, one year, I forget the count, but, we had like 200 square feet of pumpkins.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
Come out of it.
One of those pumpkins.
Compost heap.
Oh, my God.
Beautiful. Right,
And I don't remember how many, but.
there were several.
Oh,
I remember
more
there
than
were
several, yeah.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. So anyway, this can go in the stuff that's going in the compost pile. This is all raw stuff. Okay, I did want to show you this. So, okay, so when you make a pile, I mean, if you really wanna, you can spend your life doing it, turning it, do all kinds of things. Or you can just, as some people said, you know, put it on the pile and you have better things to do. So, all right, and they all works. As my apron says, compost happens. And I said something to my neighbor this morning about, could I say the other phrase? And she said, oh, young people don't care anymore. Well, so I don't have to say it. You know what the other phrase is. So anyway, and a friend gave me this apron, you know, after I was doing one of these. So these are wood chips, and I see a wonderful pile out here as I drove up. Wow. So, I mean, if you end up having a tree cut down or trimmed or whatever, you know, ask the guys for the wood chips because they're great. I mean, they're good to put around. First of all, you can't do anything with them, or you shouldn't do anything with them for about 6 months because they draw nitrogen out. So if you put them around your plants might turn yellow from lack of nitrogen. But you can ameliorate that. You can fix it by putting blood meal. Blood meal is a nitrogen source. So if you just, you know, you only had those and you wanted to mulch around your plants, spread some blood meal around with the wood chips, and that should take care of it. Because as they break down, they use the nitrogen, they're carbon. And what you need for compost is carbon and nitrogen. This is the nitrogen stuff. This is the carbon. This is carbon. These are just, you know, I had a bag of shreds, shredded mail, newspapers, whatever. So you need that combination, and you need water, but normally you can see how wet this stuff is. You know, I guess I'm gonna have to confess here. I know that if you leave vegetables long enough in your refrigerator, like all the way in the back of the drawer, you'll have a lot of liquid back there.
Yeah.
Because this stuff is mostly liquid. You know, it doesn't look like it, it's hard, you know, carrots, all that stuff. But when it sits long enough, you know, a little science experiment in your refrigerator, it'll be liquid. So mostly you might not have to add liquid, any water, but you know, in the middle of August or something, if you see it's dry, and this is two things to look for. If your pile smells, that means you have too much nitrogen. Your compost pile should not smell. And if you wanted to and Zoom, I don't know how you're going to jump out and do it, but you could come over here and smell. This is from my compost pile.
I love the smell.
Smells wonderful, just smells earthy. Now, I did bring to show the difference, but it might be what we're really smelling, is this was from a bucket that was sitting and it was just put out there recently, but I did want to bring, you know, something that didn't smell good to see the difference. And if you wanted to come up and smell this, this is what happens if it sits too long. But if you know, mix it up with the carbon stuff, it'll be fine. So if you really wanted to be diligent, you could turn your pile every 3 or 4 days, maybe once a week. I used to do it once a week in my older, younger days. Because in order to really cook, it needs air. And so by turning it, you know, you're incorporating air into the pile. But here, I like to show something like this. So here's a corn cob. And you know how hard corn cobs are. Well, now watch, this won't happen. I think it will. I can just go like that. It's on the way. You know, it's not all the way soft yet, but it's on the way. So here's avocado, and it takes a little longer to break down, but it's filled with good. So some stuff was in there and broke down already, but this takes a little longer. This is a stem from probably a pumpkin, I'm not sure, but it's a stem from a, you know, one of those kind of plants, gourd or whatever. So this pile is sort of on the way. Now, if I waited about another week or a week or two with mixing it and all that, it wouldn't smell. It does smell right now because I wanted to burn something. But see, this is half done. These are toilet paper rolls. I wouldn't throw a toilet paper. In fact, when I'm in a public bathroom,
Oh, no, we are.
do I want to take that off? I never have, but I do sort of want to. And here in the bathroom, wife's been real impressed that they have a little container for the paper towels. So you dry your hand. I mean, it would be even better with a real towel, but I know, you know, when you're in a public place, most people don't want to use a real towel. But when the paper towels are getting recycled, that's pretty good. And I think it's not just recycled. I mean, you could consider composting recycling, but they're being composted is what I believe. So, and I have somebody here shaking their head that really knows. So that's true.
We
I
do.
always love to see that. Okay. So these are wood chips, and I have a pile of wood chips in my yard, and they're from last year, so they're really good to use. But I just want to show, this is from a little square area that my neighbor's grandkids play in, okay? This is dirt, and they, you know, make mud pies and build what they call sand castles, except it's dirt, and they pack it down in a bucket, turn the bucket over, and there it is. And they like to jump on it and crush it. But this was from an old pile of wood chips. So if you just leave them and don't do anything with them, which is what happened in that spot, it turns into this wonderful. I mean, I just absolutely love this. It's wonderful dirt, and nothing was done to it. It just was ignored. The wood chips were ignored, didn't do a thing to them. Okay, so that's what's in this bucket. And this was in their little square area where they played. So I told my neighbor I borrowed it. Okay, let's see. All right, I brought a heavy, I mean, this is heavy. It's a log. Okay, relatively fresh. And just to show what happens to wood if you just leave it alone, look at this. It's like a sponge. This was something like that. And this too. Look at this.
Unbelievable.
So, I mean, you might want to, one thing I've never been accused of is being real neat. So if you are real neat, you will never have stuff like this. But, if you just leave it somewhere in the corner, there you go. Okay, I did want to bring, this is regular compost. So if you look at it, there's some stuff that's not broken down, but it's, it's kind of soft, breaks apart. I would put this on my garden because it's eventually going to get eaten by something in the ground. And the more natural stuff you have on your ground, you'll have more worms. I love to dig into a pile. And usually I was surprised today it didn't happen, but I've never dug looking for worms at this time of the year. Usually it's April. The 2 times that I've done it is April and September. September, you have to really dig because it's been so hot and so dry that they tunnel down deep. And I don't think from the cold they've actually tunneled back up because like in April, I used to do it for a preschool class, and they love worms, of course. Forget the dirt, forget the compost. They just want to see wiggling things. So I would just put the shovel in. Wow, they were all over, wiggling. But I did find some. They were, they weren't so prolific, but, here they are. They're wiggling.
I can show.
Okay,
Let's get a up close and personal. I don't. I don't.
Okay, there you go.
Babies. Here, guy. Just because I know you were curious. They're moving. They almost look like little lizards.
So you want to have worms in your dirt. What I like to say, and people, I don't know. People buy, you can find it in gardening magazines for, so much for a pound of worm poop.
Mm-hmm.
They don't call it worm poop. They call it worm castings. That's what it is.
Really?
That's
I
what
haven't
it
heard
is. It's worm poop, and it's, really rich and wonderful. Something else that if you know someone that has chickens, chicken poop is really nice and rich. I made the mistake once of getting a load, like a little, I don't know what to call it, one of those open 3-sided things filled with horse stuff that they cleaned out a barn until it was, nice, but it had a million weed seeds. I'd never do it again. Because, they eat whatever they were eating, the hay or, I don't know, had a lot of weed seeds in it. Or the seeds from that hay, but as far as I was concerned, it was weed seeds that kept coming up wherever I spread that stuff. So, okay, somebody did ask me.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, you can ask it.
Zoo poop, they advertise
I
that.
would say that's really good because they're not going to give you, it's what they've eaten and
Okay, and poop,
eliminated.
and defecated or whatever. So, zoo poo would be
Right.
okay
Good.
compared to
Sure.
horse manure from
Yeah,
the
I mean,
farm.
and horse manure is probably fine and great, but,
Right,
wouldn't
I
do
get it.
again. I wouldn't do it again. I have a couple of books. Well, this is my favorite about composting. It's called Let It Rot. Okay, so you can think of composting as rotting, except rot doesn't sound very pleasant. It sounds stinky and smelly, but there's lots of different ways to compost. We already talked about the fact that you could just put it out there and let it go. If you were really making a pile that you wanted to use, relatively soon, so you have a mixture. Oh, and also companies will try to sell you enzymes to put on your compost pile to help activate it. You don't need those. That's ridiculous. Take a shovel full of dirt, everything you need will be in that pile of dirt. Just throw it on. If you already have compost or you have a friend that has compost, get a bucket of compost. Or they won't give you a bucket, they'll give you a cheese. They give you a shovel full of it. It's like giving plants away. I love to share plants. You know, I have a lot of perennials and stuff. But I tend to want to shake the dirt off them. You know, some people will dig a whole big thing of dirt. Well, the dirt is almost more precious to me than the plant. The plants you can proliferate pretty easily. The compost takes a while. And if you're really going to do it, it takes work. So this is what I was going to say. You start, say you're brand new and you're starting a pile. Okay. So on the bottom, I would put some carbon stuff. It could be torn up newspaper. It could be cardboard. It could be wood chips. Something that's carbon. And then on top of that, and you know, it doesn't have to be all layered, but on top of that, you'd put the kitchen scraps, food scraps. Would I put leftover salad? No. If you have dressing on your salad at night, unless you're willing to rinse it, and then you'd almost need hot water really to get all the grease. Things you never put on your compost pile are meat, grease, anything to do with animals, except, as I said, the eggshells. Now, don't ask me why, but you can put eggshells on, but never put grease, or that's, you know, if you're worried about things getting in your pile or some kind of varmints, it's meat and grease that would draw them, vegetables.
So is that the main reason, so you don't draw varmints?
Yeah, and I mean, eventually it would break down, but because it's grease covered, or, you know, like the salad that was on your plate would be grease covered, it takes much, much longer. So you never want to put any kind of salad dressing, butter, grease in your pile. So, you know.
I heard cheese too. I don't know why.
Yeah.
So do you
Cheese,
put cheese?
no,
No, not to put it.
right.
Is that
It's an
because-
animal product.
Okay, that's,
So, you know, it doesn't come out of the ground, so it's an easy way to.
So the
it's
same way,
that's it.
eggshells are okay, but like
Yeah.
a leftover fried egg, don't compost that.
And I don't put eggs in, I put eggshells in. You know, do I know the scientific whatever? No, I don't. So there might be somebody out there that does, but I don't. So, so when you start a pile,
I think you had a question.
Do you have any ballpark recommendations for proportions of carbon?
okay, there are ratios, and I bet in this book it tells you. My way to tell if it's a dry pile, you don't have enough nitrogen stuff. If it's wet and stinky, if you can smell ammonia, you shouldn't smell that smell. It doesn't have to be real obnoxious, but if it smells like ammonia, you don't have enough carbon. To me, you know, I'm not gonna worry about 20% of this and 40% of something else. I mean, how do you know? One's heavier, one's lighter. So you tell by the pile, that's all. And in order for a pile to cook, which is the fastest way, I love, okay, I'll tell you another thing I love. Boy, I guess I'm a little passionate. I haven't done this in a while, so I forgot how much I like all of it. Anyway, in the winter, there is nothing like seeing steam. When it's real cold and seeing steam come out of your pile, it's like, oh yes, it's working. But in order to have a pile that is cooking, it has to be at least 3 feet high and 3 feet wide. That's one reason they say, I mean, you can put weeds in your pile without the tops. I mean, you could put in the tops, but that's one of the problems. If it's hot enough in the middle, it would break down the seeds, but you'll end up with seeds on the outside. You turn it, but there's no guarantee that you're going to get all the seeds in the middle to get broken down. So mostly the suggestion is to cut the tops off and just use the stems, and be careful if it's a plant that proliferates by roots. You know, if you put in those, you'll end up with a crop of that. One of them is Johnson grass.
Mm.
You know, if you've ever had Johnson grass,
We have a lot of that here.
yeah, it's a bird to get rid of.
Mhm.
You pull it up and any little piece of root that you leave in the ground will be a whole nother plant.
Mhm.
And the roots are big and, yeah, so you don't wanna, you could maybe if everything was absolutely fine, but you don't wanna do that. So,
Did anyone on Zoom have any questions? I know she's dropping a lot of knowledge. Any questions? Good? Okay. Okay.
Do you have your phone to take a picture?
Yeah.
Because you want to put this on Instagram.
I sure will.
We need to put you as a celebrity on social media.
you should see my,
Be sure.
Oh, here, I sure will.
I told you, somebody took a picture this morning already. of that.
Show it to
Oh,
Linda.
yeah,
She's-
yeah.
she's
Okay.
I'll do it right now.
Here we are. Compost happens. This is for people that just want to put it out there. They don't want to spend their life playing around. Just put it out there. Okay. So if you're making a new pile, I never finished that. On the bottom, you might put some form of nitrogen. It could be, ripped up.
No, you mean
newspaper
carbon.
shreds. Carbon, right. This is the carbon, dry. And sometimes people call it greens and browns. Greens are the nitrogen and browns are the carbon, but that can be confusing because
Right.
coffee grounds are brown, but it's a nitrogen source. So, I tend to try not to say that, but I might. I forget. So you might put that on the bottom, then put a layer of this, then a shovel full of dirt, then another layer of this, then another layer of this. And it could be kitchen scraps. It could be, people mostly now do not collect grass clippings, but that's something you could put out. But they would, if you are a person that catches your grass clippings, most people now just mulch them because it adds. I have a cartoon I love about that. I'll tell you in a minute. But so nitrogen, and that would be grass clippings. But if you did use grass clippings, you wouldn't want to put the whole pile on because they mat up. So you'd want to spread them a little bit so that, all the good critters that are going to eat and the enzymes that are going to break it down can get in there. So you just keep doing that. And, a couple of shovels of dirt and that'll get the action. You might want to, when you just started, you might want to just sprinkle more water. But it's not absolutely necessary. It should work anyway.
How about fallen leaves?
Oh, definitely. Now, you can, again, if you have a whole pile of leaves that nothing's been done to, they might mat together kind of, but if you open them and peel it, you'll probably find some little worms in there if they're wet. And so, they'll break it down eventually, but they're really nice if you mulch them. I used to, my husband would mow the stuff that would go in a circle and then mow over it. And they're in smaller pieces. Anything that's in smaller pieces, like this, in the old days, I probably wouldn't put this in because it's big. In the house, I would cut it up because it breaks down fast. That was when I really was very enthusiastic.
Would dead leaves classify as carbon or nitrogen? Yeah, okay.
Now, if they're green, maybe they, I don't know. No one's ever asked me about green leaves because it'd be hard to get up there and get them. But once they fall, it's a source of carbon. Yeah.
I read, Bobbie, that oak leaves were not good. Because I have a big oak.
I've used them.
You have?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oak leaves are kind of like coffee ground. They'll acidify the soil. You can use oak leaves as a match for acid-loving plants. But as far as the contribution to compost, no,
You're
I don't
mixing
know.
other stuff in, so it shouldn't.
Well, you can.
There are a lot of things that I'm saying that somebody who is a real would say, oh, why is she saying that? But I'm just telling you my experience and what I've read that I hooked onto. So it might not be the most scientific way, but it all works.
There's roly-polies running around. They come out of that,
Out
right?
of my piles,
Yeah.
okay. It's alive. What's at the hills? Are alive. Oh, this isn't a singing thing, okay. All right, now, so we talked about piles, and I have a field behind me and I do a pile. And a lot of people don't have the ability to just do a pile. You might, even if you just have a yard, you might have a corner or maybe behind the garage or depending that you could do a pile. But a lot of people live in areas with HOAs and, you know, all that stuff, and you have rules and regulations, which stand. But, so there are other ways to compost that should not absolutely prohibit you from doing compost. So one of the ways that's pretty unobtrusive, is to have a trash can, okay? Cut the bottom out, and holes in the sides so that air gets in, and do your layering in the trash can, you know, a big trash can. It'll work and it won't look, it'll just look, you know, like you should have dirt underneath it though. So you shouldn't do it, you know, in your garage or something, probably. Maybe somebody does, I don't know, but this way, if there's dirt underneath it, you know, the enzymes and all that stuff, you get in there, and it'll work. There's another way called post-hole composting. So I don't know if you've ever seen, when people are making a fence, they have a,
Mhm.
and then you go like this.
Post digger.
I've never done it myself. I mean, I've never used one. My husband did it when I wanted to compost. So you make a deep hole, and you can make a deep hole any way you want, but that's why it's called that. And then just put your stuff in the hole and cover it up. Nobody sees it, but eventually that will break down. The worms will get it, the other little whatevers, you know. So that's a way to do it.
So in that case, it's just for enhancing the soil in place. You aren't
Right, you're
removing it
not
and
moving
taking
it
it to
around,
a
you're not
garden or
doing anything with it, right?
something.
And so another thing that's similar is called sheet composting. So if you garden with rows, for instance, which, you know, a lot of people still do that, you lay, well, first of all, I would lay either cardboard or newspaper down in the middle between the rows. And it's good to wet them because if they dry, it's taking moisture out of whatever's on top. And so wet the newspaper or cardboard, and then pile your kitchen scraps and stuff on top. And then put wood chips or whatever, so it looks like it's just beautifully mulched. But only you know that you're doing good things to the soil. And then what some people do the next year or maybe 2 years later, they plant in those rows and you know, do your compost, sheet posting in that where you had the plants before. So it's another way of doing it if you don't have the ability to make a pile.
What's the advantage of having the underlayer of paper or cardboard rather than
Just putting
putting
it
it
on
on the ground between the rows?
Well, for one thing, the weeds might come up. If you have weeds, they might, this way it kills the weeds too. So if you have any weeds or grass that might come up, it kills it. I've also put old jeans that were ripped. I mean, now if I had ripped up jeans, you know, I'd be real in style. And in the old days, you were just a kind of a bum if you were. So I put jeans, just laid them out in the middle, you know, where I was going to put other stuff on top. And they're not there anymore. I don't know when they disappeared, but they disappeared. You know, they're cotton, it's not good. I used to put old socks, cotton socks. And it's interesting if you know, get them when you can still see that they're socks and you pull them apart. They're soft, you know, they just come apart because they're on the way. So it's another way. Okay. Oh, this book is called Lasagna Gardening. Now, no, it doesn't mean that lasagna will grow in your garden. You still have to do the layers of noodles and cheese and all that stuff, but it's layering. So really they say that the best time to do lasagna gardening, you can really do it anytime, but in the fall. So you do layers, a lot of layers, and you might use some compost. You might, if you have a compost pile, you might buy a bag of compost, depends how much you want to get into it. But you take, rope off whatever you want to do for your garden, and then you put, again, I would put cardboard, and they suggest you can do it right on top of grass. And next year, the next spring or summer, it will be broken down, and the ground will be soft. A lot of experts, that I'm not one of, don't recommend tilling anymore, because you're bringing up old weed seeds, for one thing. There's a lot of weed seeds that have been laying in there for years and years and years. You're bringing them up. Sun's going to hit them, moisture, whatever, they're going to start sprouting. So you're going to have more weeds. The other thing is, with doing that, if you do it year after year, you end up with a hard pan underneath where the tiller or whatever has constantly done that. You're compacting the ground underneath, and then maybe the roots can't get to it. Whatever. I mean, that's just, we had a tiller at one time before I knew. And then Bob wanted to play with the tiller, and I didn't want him to. So it was like, I spent this couple of thousand, or I don't know how much it was, and now you don't want me to use it? What is that? So, those are all ways that you can compost without doing a pile. Oh, and there's those, I think a lot of people have had those
Drums like.
drums, thank you. Yeah, a drum that you turn, and it's doing the same thing. But I know one person that got good compost on it. It's not that they don't work, it's that people don't put the things in they need. They put a lot of kitchen scraps, but they don't put the carbon in there, and it ends up being a slimy mess and stinks, and they don't want to do it anymore. That happens. I mean, I've known several people that's happened to. And as I say, one person had great stuff in it every, so many months. You turn it so that gets the air, there's screens or something, or you open it, and so you turn it. I know someone that has what she calls a counter composter, and I'm not sure how it works, but there's some kind of action in this thing that's on her counter that makes it. So you'd have to do a little research on it. I've never been interested because, what I do is always worth time, so I don't need to spend any more money on something else.
I think that Pela, I think it's PELA. I think they make like compostable phone cases, and they made a very expensive countertop composting thing. Whenever you mentioned being lazy in the beginning, I thought that's me. And I don't put it on my counter, but I put it in a grocery bag in my freezer, so I can go months without having to go take it to the counter.
Yes, great.
Yes, so that's a good tip. And I have like half my freezer full of bags of compost, and I'm like, I gotta take it out. I literally will take it out until when I can't close the door. Yes, yeah,
I love it.
yes. And it doesn't stink because it's frozen.
It's frozen, so it doesn't get,
Yeah.
get bad or anything.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. What's your opinion of having more than one pile or more than in an enclosure where you sort of age it?
Here's
Or
what
is that more trouble than it's?
Well, I don't think it's, if you see, they make or tell you how to make bins, and they usually have 3 of them. One is for all fresh stuff and, wood chips or newspaper or whatever. That's the first pile. And then the middle would be a pile that's really working, And then the last one would be the good stuff. It'd be done, you'd be ready to use it in your garden, your planters, whatever. So yeah, 3, and so I've had friends that would bring their, after they heard me, they'd say, oh, I don't want to throw that stuff in the garbage. So they would bring me their compost. And I wasn't going to play with it, but I'd say, okay, there's the pile out there. And I'd leave my spading fork where they should put it. That was the fresh pile. And so, and I'd always say, you know, shovel a little bit of, there's some leaves there, whatever, cover it up. Doesn't look nice, so cover it, so neighbors don't think, well, that looks real ugly, whatever. You know how people are, they don't think this is beautiful. So, yeah, I leave that, but then there's the, you know, a pile here that was, and it might not be real discernible as a pile, because as I said, I'm not real neat, but then the last one would be stuff that you're ready to dig out. Yeah, you don't want to keep adding new stuff to a pile because you'll never have finished compost. It doesn't mean you can't use it, because just like I said, you know, eventually if you put it around, then you might want to cover it. But if you want to end up with nice finished compost, then you have 3 different things waiting for you.
Do you want to open up to questions for anybody on Zoom that might want to ask you some, since you are the expert in the your experience?
Yeah.
Any
Anybody
any
have
questions?
anything? Or corrections? Or
I have a question.
comments, criticism?
When do you know you can use the compost, I guess? Like put it into the plants? When is the final time to select what is usable?
So is the question, when can you use it?
Yeah, how do you know when it's ready?
Okay. Well,
Exactly.
you know, when it looks like this, it's for sure ready. There are some pieces of leaves in there, but you know, you can use it. I mean, if you're not actually planting in the middle, you can put it around when it's like this. I mean, there's stuff that's broken down, but there's a lot of pieces in here. Like my fudgicle stick is still, that takes a long time to break down. But, so there's no hard and fast rule, but when it looks like nice loose dirt, then it's perfect for using.
Would you say like this is an example of usable?
Oh, this is perfect.
This is perfect.
the
I'll show
stuff-
her a hand.
Yeah, this is the stuff that was at the bottom of an ignored wood
got a
chip
leaf in
pile
there.
for many years.
It's hard to show on Zoom. I'm like, can
I
you
see, oh, it's actually good. The camera is good.
That's good.
Pot
Yeah.
and do a pot.
So is it better to have,
Right
I'll use some of this and dirt.
Okay.
This loosens soil. Okay, what are the advantages? It loosens the soil. It also adds low level fertilizer. You know, it would be like 2, 3 or something, 3. Low numbers, not like, you know, Miracle Grow 20 or something like that. I would never use Miracle Grow, by the way. Anyway,
I think
So-
Beatrice had another question.
so is it better to have 2 or 3 piles? So one is being processed to the one you add every day and the other one that is actually cooking? Otherwise, it's all constantly non-ready, I guess. is my
I
question.
like the idea of 3 different piles if you have room for that, because then you can just keep adding fresh to one spot. Because if you have one pile and you're always adding fresh, then you never end up with just a completely done pile.
Yeah,
But
it's true. Yeah.
you know, you can still use it. Like I said, it could be done and then put mulch on top, maybe wood chips on top.
Okay.
And remember, wood chips, you never want to use fresh wood chips. If you do, because it draws nitrogen out of the soil. I know I said that already, but it's important to remember. You can add like blood meal to it and that'll add the nitrogen. But, you know, with the pile of wood chips, if you just leave them for 6 months or so, they're fine to use wherever you want to.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I think
Don, I had a Zoom question here. That impressive log on the other end of the table, how long would it take to compost that? How much time would you
It's a
allow?
long time. Now, if I was, you know, very scientific, I would say, okay, this date I have this, and then I checked it in a year or 2 years, but I don't know. It's just, I look around when I'm ready to do something like this, and I find the wood that's, you know, soft. I don't know how long. I can't tell you that. Sorry.
oh, Joan had a question. Yeah.
Yes. Now, my compost pile isn't big enough that I've ever seen heat steaming off of it. And I've heard that it takes a certain amount of heat to break down seeds. And we eat squash. So I put in, acorn squash seeds and butternut squash seed, and of course, pumpkin, we ended up with that. And we've ended up with some, frankenfood where they hibernized in the compost pile. But can I expect that the seeds eventually would break down and I could use them?
The seeds will break down eventually. It takes longer. A hot pile will break them down much faster. Otherwise, they're hard. They have hard shells, so they take longer. You don't have to have a hot pile. It's just that, and you get nutrients in both a cold pile or a hot pile, but the hot pile is kind of exciting.
It's exciting.
Anything else? Hey, now Joan is the one that said, what, after 5 minutes, then what? I almost filled the hour. Okay.
Awesome.
Anything else? Any questions over there? Let's see. What else did I want to? I mean, I could get into recycling a little bit. I don't like to talk about recycling so much. Recycling is good. It's better than things going and this is a form of recycling, of course. But sometimes recycling is used as a little Band-Aid to make you feel good. Oh, and that's one thing I did want to talk about. This can make you feel good. You're adding wonderful stuff to the dirt. For earth advocates, we have 1,000 of them around here, I know. This is exactly what you would want to do, so feeling good about stuff is a good thing. That's one thing I learned from doing some meditations, and that's one of the things that motivates you to continue doing whatever it is that you want to do that's good. Wallow is probably not a good word. That's kind of a negative, but that's kind of the way. Wallow in the good feeling. You can do that. Don't wallow in your compost. But okay.
I have just a couple of things. You've spoken to this, but these are things I've been told not to put in.
Okay, yeah.
Onions.
I always forget.
Ignore that, okay? Bread or cereal?
Well, oatmeal. It's just oats. That's fine. You cook it. It's just oats and water. You have leftover oatmeal, you won't put it in, that's fine.
But if you put butter on it.
If you put butter on it.
Or any kind of topping kind of stuff,
Yeah.
right, that's not.
And also boxed cereals, that have all kinds of other.
Forget it, don't add
I
that.
wouldn't do it.
Okay.
And that's got milk in it.
And if you put milk, you don't
Then
put
you don't
milk
have
or dairy, no dairy products.
No, I'm talking more about like stuff that's gone stale, that's dry.
I wouldn't do it. I
So
wouldn't.
much
I
added.
mean, maybe it'd be okay.
What about citrus?
Well, okay, that's a good question. I have read that a lot of citrus, this was after, I'll tell you the before in a minute, but if you put a lot of citrus on it, it can slow things down and it does evidently some other bad stuff. And I'll tell you, I used to pick up from Honey Brothers 5 buckets, the 5-gallon buckets, 5 of those 2 times a week. And I put those on my compost pile. That was before I knew that probably citrus, and that was a lot of citrus. I put in, if I have an orange and a tangerine, all that, I always put that in. I would never not do it.
Okay.
But buckets and buckets of citrus is probably not the best thing to do. I never had that compost tested or anything, but, and it was great because they put it through some kind of machine to make the juice. And so the rinds all had, or the peelings all had lines through them, so they broke down faster than just put in an orange peel here. But I got to the point where I couldn't lift the buckets from the ground into the trunk, and then from the trunk down, and then out to the pile. It was too much. And it was really a lot of citrus. That was 10-gallon I mean, 10 5-gallon buckets a week.
Oh my God.
Then I got somebody else to do it on one day, and eventually I just stopped doing it. And 5-gallon buckets are like a treasure. If you know anybody that says, they sell them at Home Depot, and I don't know how much they are, $4 or $5 maybe. So if you have buckets, people really like to have one.
I was gonna say, we need some more 5-gallon buckets here. We got cracks in the bottom of them, so we had to recycle them. We're like, ugh.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
So I do have, I think we just cleaned out a barn, and I had to not look at everything that was going. But anyway, there were some buckets that were really old and they were cracking in the tops and stuff because they're plastic. They don't last forever. All right. Well, I think that I might be done. I probably forgot some real wonderful thing I wanted to tell you.
No, this was wonderful. Thank you.
You're welcome.
We should
Okay.
clap.
Yeah, can we clap?
Since there's so many meditation groups here, I did want to talk a little bit about meditation while you're doing this. Both meditation and memories. So, a lot of these vegetable things that are in this pile here were from last Friday that I went to a wake for the husband of a good friend of mine. So when I look at this, I think of them and I send loving kindness thoughts to the family. So it doesn't have to just be a job you're doing, but it can be meditative. When my husband was alive, he liked routines. And so there would be a twist of lemon, a couple of, so I remember the fun. I don't know. We had company, so it can be a fun thing too, not just a job you're doing. So,
And we know you have fond memories of the fudger club.
yes, always every vegetable is delicious. All right, I think that is it for me.
Yay.
Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is my first Zoom demonstration, so I was a little nervous about it, but
You did great. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I can't believe
Thank you.
That's very good.
She said she couldn't believe you did an hour.
How many people do we have on Zoom?
4.
4, yeah.
fill the time. Okay,
Yay.
there's nothing else. We can say goodbye. And I can pick up all my stuff.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Excellent.
Get in touch with me, if you have questions or, whatever.
What's the best way to get in touch with you first?
Okay, you have my information, right? You have my
Yes.
phone number, you can text me, you have my email? It's,
I do. Yeah.
okay, so there you go. Olivia can put you in touch with me, but my email is pretty easy. It's Roberta P, as in Pauline, Moore @yahoo.com. All one word, Roberta P. Moore. So that's my email
At Yahoo?
@Yahoo.
Okay.
Right.
Yay.
Okay, thank you.
Bye, Zoom people.